Cakewalk. Cakewalk. It's an idiom. It means something very easily achieved. That is completing a task without having to put in too much of an effort. In other words, a task that is easily, effortlessly, or certain to be accomplished is called a cakewalk. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, given your experience, getting the job should be a cakewalk. So you have lot of experience, it's easy for you to get a job. That's the reason getting job should be a cakewalk, very easy. Second one, the first couple of rounds of the tournament should be a cakewalk. In any tournament, the first matches are like very easy matches. Easily we can win the matches. That's the reason they are cakewalks. Third one, this new project is no cakewalk. It's taking up all my time. So this new project is not a easy one. I cannot complete it easily. I am spending all my time. That's the reason it is not cakewalk. It is no cakewalk. Fourth one, I've been running marathons for years now. So this 5K run will be a cakewalk for me. So I have run many marathons till now. So this 5K run, 5 kilometers run is not very difficult for me. I can easily win the marathon. That's the reason 5K run will be a cakewalk for me. Fifth one, it's no cakewalk to raise a family on 2 part-time salaries, even for a little while. If husband and wife work on part-time salaries, less amount, it's very difficult to run a family show. So they cannot raise the family. That's the reason it's no cakewalk. It is not very easy to run the family with 2 part-time salaries. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, cakewalk, it is a form of entertainment among African Americans. Well-dressed couples who took part in this competition were made to walk around a cake. The pair that performed this task most gracefully was awarded a prize. In most cases, the prize was the cake itself. The winner used to take the cake. Later, the word cakewalk was used to refer to a popular form of dance. So finally, cakewalk is anything that is easily accomplished, easily achieved is called cakewalk. Call a spade a spade. Call a spade a spade. It's an idiom. It means to speak in a straightforward manner or in a blunt manner. In other words, to not dress the truth up and speak in a straightforward way. So if you are not hiding anything and if you speak very straightforward, then you are calling a spade a spade. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, I don't think Ramesh is a sort of a person who would call a spade a spade. So Ramesh never speaks in a straightforward way. That's the reason he would never call a spade a spade. Second one, I like talking to villagers. They call a spade a spade. So villagers are straightforward. They never hide anything. They call spade a spade. That's the reason I like talking to them. Third one, that dress made her look fat. Let's call a spade before she goes out wearing it and embarrasses herself. So that dress never suits her. Let us tell her the truth without hiding it before she is insulted outside. That's the reason let's call a spade a spade. Fourth one, he failed the exam twice. If you are to call a spade, then you would not push him to give it again. He already failed 2 times. Let us tell him the truth. He cannot pass the exam. Let us call a spade a spade. Don't hide anything. Let us say it fairly. Fifth one, parents are often reluctant to see any faults in their children. It is always better to call a spade rather than spoiling the children with this behavior. So this is very natural among the parents and children. Parents never find faults with their children. That's the reason they spoil their children's life. So it is better to call a spade a spade. Let us tell truth straightforwardly to the children so that it would help them. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, call a spade a spade, so this idiom is a translation of an old Greek idiom or proverb, to call a fig and a spade a spade. To call a fig and a spade a spade. So this expression was translated into Latin and was later introduced into English by John Knox, a Protestant reformer. The spade has nothing to do with the game of cards. It refers to the implement used in the garden. So to call a spade is to talk or speak in a straightforward manner without hiding anything. Called on the carpet. Called on the carpet. It's an idiom. It means to be questioned by someone in authority, or to be rebuked and held accountable for a mistake or an offense. In other words, to criticize someone for doing something wrong. If you are called on the carpet, that means you did something wrong. Then you are accountable for it. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, the students were called on the carpet for cheating in the exams. So the students cheated in the exams, copied in the exams, so they were called for explanation by the principal. That's the reason they were called on the carpet. Second one, the new employee was called on the carpet for taking too many tea breaks. He joined the job and he is taking a lot of tea breaks, not working properly. That's the reason he was asked for the explanation, questioned by the authority. That's the reason he was called on the carpet. Third one, when my team lost that big client, the boss called me on the carpet. So it is because of me the client we lost. So the boss was angry. He scolded me. So he called me on the carpet. He asked me explanation. Fourth one, he was or got called on the carpet for missing the deadline. So the deadline was yesterday, but he did not submit the project report, maybe any other report. So he was asked for the explanation. So he was called on the carpet. So the boss scolded him. Fifth one, the bad boy of English cricket was on the carpet again this week for refusing to wear one of the club's sponsored shirts. So the club is sponsoring a shirt and this cricket man refused to wear. He doesn't want to wear it. That's the reason he was scolded by the authorities, sponsored members. So called on the carpet idiom, let us see how it has come into existence. In the olden days, most officers did not have the carpet. Only the most important people in the organization were given one. Therefore, when you say that someone was called on the carpet, what you mean is that a person in a subordinate position was called on to the boss's room to face the music. The person literally stood on the carpet while the boss gave him a piece of his mind. So finally, called on the carpet is to be questioned by the authority in charge. Can't hold a candle to someone. Can't hold a candle to someone. It's an idiom. It means not be equal to someone. If you say that one person or thing can't hold a candle to another, you meant that the first person or thing is not nearly as good as the second. When both persons or things are not same, you say you can't hold a candle to someone. Let us see it in the examples. First one, as a teacher, Satish cannot hold a candle to Ramu. So Ramu is greater than Satish here. So Satish cannot hold a candle to Ramu means Satish is not equivalent to Ramu. So Satish is inferior to Ramu. Ramu is superior. That's the reason Satish cannot hold a candle to Ramu. Second one, according to Manasa, her stepmother cannot hold a candle to her. So according to Manasa, her stepmother is not equivalent to her own mother. That's the reason her stepmother cannot hold a candle for her. Third one, he may have the most beautiful girlfriend, but she cannot hold a candle to my fiance. Ramya is kind, beautiful and smart. So he is having girlfriend, but so my fiance would be Ramya. My fiance, Ramya, is more kind, beautiful and smart than his girlfriend. That's the reason she cannot hold a candle to my fiancé. Fourth one, her latest book is readable enough, but it cannot hold a candle to her earlier works. So her earlier works are good, not the latest book. That's the reason it cannot hold a candle to her earlier work. Fifth one, everyone on my street has a landscaping service, but I have so many interesting plants, no one's garden can hold a candle to mine. So my garden is the best garden. No one's candle can hold a candle to mine. Means my garden is superior to all other gardens in my street. So can't hold a candle to someone. When we look at the origin of this idiom, so this expression has been around for several hundred years. In the olden days, when street lighting was almost non-existent, the fairly well-to-do people had servants who followed them everywhere with a candle. Those that did not have servants hired link boys. These boys carried lanterns and candles, and they provided necessary light for people to get from one part of the town to another. Since the servants and the link boys were looked down upon by the masters, the expression can't hold a candle to someone began to mean someone who is inferior. So finally, we can understand that can't hold a candle to someone means someone who is inferior, not equal to the other. Can't see the wood for the tree. Can't see the wood for the tree. It's an idiom. It means missing the big picture by focusing on the non-essential things. That is, to be unable to get a general understanding of a situation because you are too worried about the details. So when you cannot understanding the entire thing, then you can't see the wood for the tree. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, the information presented in this book is so disorganized that I can't see the wood for the trees. The book is not organized in a proper manner, so I cannot get the general idea of this particular book. That's the reason I can't see the wood for the trees. Second one, brilliant as he was, Ramesh sometimes couldn't see the forest for the trees. Ramesh brilliant only, but sometimes he concentrates on non-essential things, so he couldn't see the forest for the trees. So he cannot have the overall understanding of something. Third one, from the questions that were asked after the presentation, it was fairly obvious that most of the participants couldn't see the wood for the trees. Session completed. They asked the simple questions. So by the questions, we understood that they did not understand the session completely. That's the reason participants couldn't see the wood for the trees. Fourth one, he often helped those who could not see the wood for the trees reach the correct decision. He's a real good man. He helps the people who cannot understand the general idea of something. He gives them the general idea, what exactly the general idea of something. That's the reason who could not see the wood for the trees. Fifth one, the way he is obsessing over one doorknob when we were renovating the entire house makes me think that he cannot see the wood for the trees. He is so obsessed with a small thing, doorknob, and he forgot that he is building a house. That's the reason he cannot see the bigger picture of the house. He's wasting a lot of time on doorknob. So that is the reason he cannot see the wood for the trees. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, can't see the wood for the tree, sometimes we focus our attention on the beauty of a single tree instead of taking in a grandeur or magnificence of the forest. So when we do such kind of things, then we call such people as they can't see the wood for the tree, which means they cannot understand the overall idea of something because they are lost in one particular inessential thing. Carrot and stick approach. Carrot and stick approach. It's an idiom. It means to reward those who do their job and punish those who do not do their job. That is, it is a mixture of rewards and punishments. And if you do your job, you get a reward. If you don't, you get a punishment. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, teachers use both the carrot and stick to make sure students to do their work. It's very essential for any teacher. A teacher should reward a bright student and should punish a student who is not exactly doing what a student should do. That's the reason teachers use both the carrot and stick approach. Second one, some schools prefer the carrot and stick method when it comes to education. So they strictly follow reward and punishment method when it comes to education, some schools. Third one, the government says it favors a carrot and stick approach to get the unemployed youth back to work. So government is ready to provide employment for the youth who are ready to do, and to give the punishment for the youth who are not willing to do any job. That's the reason carrot and stick approach. Fourth one, the government wanted to introduce a carrot and stick method to reduce crime. So it wanted to give rewards, prizes to the good people and punishment to the bad people in order to reduce the crime in the country. So that's the reason it introduced a carrot and stick method. Fifth one, being a boss, she need to apply the carrot and stick approach effectively to discipline her junior team members. She has to know whom to appreciate, whom to punish, whom to give rewards and whom to punish. Then only she can be a big boss, an accurate boss. When we look at the origin of this idiom carrot and stick approach, the carrot and stick approach was first used by the owners of donkeys in order to keep their animals moving. Whenever the animal stopped, the rider used to dangle a raw carrot in front of animal's nose. If the stubborn animal still refused to move, the owner gave it a sound thrashing with a stick. Then obviously it moves, right? So that is how this idiom carrot and stick approach has come into existence. So it means to reward those who do their job correctly and punish those who don't do their job in time. So it's a mixture of reward and punishments. Carry coals to Newcastle. Carry coals to Newcastle. It's an idiom. It means to do something unnecessarily. That is, to do something redundant, frivolous or unnecessarily. If you are doing some work unnecessarily, then you are really carrying coals to Newcastle. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, Mohan was trying to sell ice cream to the Italians. That's like carrying coals to Newcastle. Italians eat the best ice creams possible in their country, and if you really sell ice cream to them, it's a waste of time because it's like carrying coals to Newcastle. Second one, exporting pine to the Scandinavians is like carrying coals to Newcastle. Scandinavian country is the largest country which produces pine, and if you really export pine to that country, who would buy? Nobody, right? It's waste of time, unnecessary work. That's the reason it's like carrying coals to Newcastle. Third one, Mr. Ravi is so rich he doesn't need money anymore. To give him a gift certificate is like carrying coals to Newcastle. What is the use of giving again gift to Ravi? He has everything. It's a waste of time. That's the reason it's like carrying coals to Newcastle. Fourth one, you are really carrying coals to Newcastle. She has many diamond rings. Why are you giving diamond ring again? She has many. It's waste of time, unnecessary work. That's the reason really carrying coals to Newcastle. Fifth one, selling refrigerators to Eskimos is like carrying coals to Newcastle. Eskimos live in the coldest area, North Pole. They have a lot of ice. It's already cold, and if you sell refrigerators, who would buy? Nobody, right? That's unnecessary work. That's the reason it's like carrying coals to Newcastle. This idiom carry coals to Newcastle also can be said as take coals to Newcastle. Take coals to Newcastle. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, Newcastle is a place in the north of England, and it is famous for its coal mines. So if you are carrying coals to Newcastle, you are merely wasting your energy. So when you really waste your energy on unnecessary things, then you are really carrying coals to Newcastle. Catch as catch can. Catch as catch can. It's an idiom. It means resorting to any method available to complete a task without being unduly worried about the ethics. Perform tasks in an unplanned and unsystematic manner. That is, done in any means or in any possible way, often in unsystematic way, haphazardly. So by all means we can say. So let us see it in the examples. The first one, the restaurant was so busy during dinner that getting service was catch as catch can. So everybody tries, by all means we should get dinner. That's it. That's the reason getting service was catch as catch can. By all means we should get the service. That's it. Second one, any new parent can tell you that sleep is catch as catch can once your baby is born. So once you become the parent, you would understand you cannot sleep properly because of the baby. So whenever there is a time, you sleep. That's the reason sleep is catch as catch can. Third one, when his former partner complained that he was taking away his clients, Rahul told him that in business it was a case of catch as catch can. When Rahul's friend told he was taking his clients, he told very clearly, in business, by all means, client is very, very important. We can take in any way. There are no ethics involved. So that is a basic thing in the business. Fourth one, there was a period in college when I was out of work and had to live catch as catch can. So by all means, I had to live sometime in the college. So I did so many other jobs because I lost my work. So my aim was to live. That's it. That's the reason I had to live catch as catch can. Fifth one, the crew was intent on finishing the project in record time. As a result, sleeping and eating were catch as catch can. There are no times for sleeping and eating. Whenever they are getting time, they are eating and sleeping. That's it. There are no specific times. So that is the reason sleeping and eating were catch as catch can. So when it comes to the catch as catch can, we can also say it as no holds barred. No holds barred. Let us check the origin of this idiom. Are you a fan of WWF wrestling? If you are, then you will understand what the word catch refers to. In freestyle wrestling, there are no restrictions on how you can hold your opponent. You can catch or hold him or her in any way you want. The idiom has more or less the same meaning as no holds barred. No holds barred. So catch as catch can means by all means. If you do something by all means, by all possible means, without taking care of the ethics, then you are really trying as catch can. Catch 22. Catch 22. It's an idiom. It means a no-win situation. That is, no matter what you do, you end up on losing side. In other words, the particular situation in which you cannot win. When you are in a position that you are not going to win, if you are going to lose, then you are in a catch 22 situation. Let us see the examples. The first one, Raju is caught in a catch 22 situation, unable to choose which way to go. Raju has a situation whether to marry or not. If he doesn't marry, his parents will die. If he marry, he will die. That's the reason that is called catch 22 situation. Second one, working parents are in the catch 22 situation as daycares remain shut during the COVID-21 pandemic. So now daycare centers are closed, but working parents should leave their children at daycare centers. So now the situation is where to leave their kids. That's really the catch 22 situation. They cannot win this situation. Third one, the coal miners are in a catch 22 situation, either quit working but have no income for themselves and their family, or keep working until they are at death's door. Working in coal mines, we know that it is very dangerous for lungs. But if they stop working, no income, they cannot run the family. So either they should work or die. That's really a catch 22 situation. Fourth one, James presently in a catch-22 situation as he is struggling to get another work visa to find a good job in somewhere else. So James is really in catch-22 situation, very difficult situation. He is not going to win the situation because no work. He has to get working visa and work also. This is really very difficult, and that's the reason in a catch-22 situation, more or less failure situation. Fifth one, I couldn't start my own business until I have got money, and I couldn't get the money until I start my own business. Oh my God, this is really catch-22 situation. Yes, if you start business, you get money. If you have money, you can start business. This is really a catch-22 situation. So when we look at the origin of this idiom catch-22, this expression comes from the title of a novel written by Joseph Heller in 1961. Many people consider this work of fiction set during the Second World War a classic. In the story, the only way that pilots could get out of combat duty was by pleading insanity. In order to be discharged, these individuals had to claim they were insane. But the catch was that only a sane person would know that going on bombing mission was dangerous. Therefore, when a pilot pleaded insanity, he was doing what any sane person would. Asking to be certified was the act of a perfectly sane man. So the result would be no discharge. So from this novel, this idiom catch-22 has come into existence, which means a no-win situation. No matter what you do, you will end up losing the game. Catch a few race. Catch a few race. It's an idiom. It means to lie down or sit outside in the sun. That is usually to sunbath or lay outside under the sun for the purpose of getting a suntan. If you really go out in the sun, then you are catching a few rays. Let's see it in the examples. The first one, he spent the early morning on the beach catching some rays. So catching some sun rays early morning. That's good for health. That's the reason catching some rays. Second one, I think I'll read the newspaper outside and catch a few rays. Catch a few sun rays. That's good for our health. Third one, now that it's sunny again after so many rainy days, we should get out and catch some rays. So sun hasn't come for many days, and after so many days it has come out. Let's catch some rays, means let's have sun bath. That's it. Fourth one, I love lying on the beach and catching some rays, and it's a habit in many countries. Fifth one, we wanted to catch some rays, but the sun never came out the whole time we were there. We went to Hawaii to bag some rays, to catch some rays. So we went to Hawaii because in our place there is no sun. So we went to Hawaii to catch some rays. So when we look at the idiomatic expression catch a few rays, it's very easy to understand. Here in this expression, rays is an informal expression which refers to the rays of the sun. So catching a few rays means catching the rays of the sun. That's it. Which means to lie down or sit outside in the sun. Cat's whiskers. Cat's whiskers. It's an idiom. It means to think you are better than others. That is, you think you are the best in group or an outstandingly good person or a thing. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, Sindhu probably thought she was the cat's whiskers in her new dress. She wore a new dress and she thinks she is the best in the group. That's the reason she was the cat's whiskers. Second one, many of our film stars think that they are the cat's whiskers. So film stars think they are the best good persons. That's the reason they are the cat's whiskers. Third one, I really like that car. It's the cat's whiskers. So that car is the best one. That's the reason it is the cat's whiskers. Fourth one, going to movies are the cat's pajama when I was a kid. So that was the best thing. That's the reason cat's pajama. It also can be said as cat's pajama. Fifth one, boy, that singer last night was the cat's whiskers, wasn't she? So last night that singer was the best singer I have seen in my life. That's the reason she was the cat's whiskers. So this cat's whiskers idiom can also be said as cat's pajama, bee sneeze, frog's eyebrows. All of them mean an outstandingly good person or a thing. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, some people believe that the expression was coined by the American cartoonist Thomas A. Dorgan. But others believe that the term refers to the fine adjustable wire used in a crystal radio. So whatever may be the reason, cat's whiskers, cat's pajama, bee sneeze, frog's eyebrows, all of them mean an outstandingly good person or a thing. Chasing rainbows. Chasing rainbows. It's an idiom. It means trying to achieve something that is impossible, or trying to do something which you are not really capable of. That is, if someone chases rainbows, they try to do something that they will never achieve. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, Raju says he wants to be the next Sachin. I think he is chasing rainbows. Raju at the age of 35 cannot become another Sachin in cricket. So that's the reason he will never achieve it. So he is chasing rainbows. Second one, it might seem like chasing rainbows, but I am convinced my research will have important applications someday. So others think that I am really doing some impossible thing. I am really chasing rainbows, but one day they realize that my research results will be useful to many people. Third one, my brother wanted to go into business, but our parents and his friends told him to quit chasing rainbows. So parents and friends are telling my brother to stop doing unnecessary things which he was not capable of, because they know his capacity. That's the reason they said to quit chasing rainbows. Fourth one, you can't chase rainbows your whole life. You need to pick a stable career and start being an adult. So you cannot go after the things which you cannot do in your life. You can never achieve in your life. You have to be stable and choose some job. That's the reason you can't chase rainbows. Fifth one, he thought he could convince the boss to appoint him as the new manager, but in fact he was chasing rainbows, which means he cannot convince the boss. That's the reason he was chasing rainbows. Chasing rainbows is an idiom. When we look at the origin, the fact is that chasing a rainbow is a meaningless activity. It is a total waste of time because you will never succeed in catching any rainbow. That is the reason chasing a rainbow is nothing but trying to achieve something that is impossible. Cheek by jowl. Cheek by jowl. It's an idiom. It means very close together. That is side by side. And if you say that people or things are cheek by jowl with each other, you are indicating that they are very close to each other. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, the students had to walk cheek by jowl along the narrow corridors. Corridors are very narrow. That's the reason students walked side by side. That is, walk cheek by jowl, side by side. Second one, in some cities, several families live cheek by jowl in a single house. It happens in metropolitan cities. They live close together in single house, very together. That's the reason cheek by jowl. Third one, the poor lived cheek by jowl in industrial mining towns in Victorian England. So when Victoria was the queen in England, poor people lived very close to the minings. That's the reason they lived cheek by jowl in industrial mining. Fourth one, Radha and her family have to live cheek by jowl with these people. So Radha and family are rich people, but these people are very poor, but she was forced to live with them together. That's the reason have to live cheek by jowl. Fifth one, hundreds of millions of poor people live cheek by jowl, easy targets for a high contagious virus like corona. That is what is happening. So if people live together side by side, very close, like cheek by jowl, so virus can attack very easily. So when we look at the origin of this idiom cheek by jowl, in the case of some people, the loose flesh in their lower cheeks hangs towards their jaw. This bit of loose flesh is called jowls. Since the cheek is very close to the jowl, The expression cheek by jowl means very close together. So it is taken from humans itself. Cheek by jowl is very close together, that is side by side. Chew the fat. Chew the fat. It also can be said as chew the rag. Chew the rag. It's an idiom. The meaning is have an informal chat with someone or complain or argue about something. In other words, a long and informal conversation with someone or to gossip with friends at leisure. That is called chew the fat. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, how nice to see you here. Have a seat and let's chew the fat for a while. I met you after a long time. Let us sit and chat for some time. Let's talk for some time. Let us gossip for some time. That's the reason let's chew the fat for some time. Second one, nothing much happened. We chewed the fat for half an hour and left. Nothing happened. We talked for half an hour. We gossiped for half an hour. That's the reason we chewed the fat for half an hour. Third one, the students chewed the fat for some time and decided not to lodge a complaint against the principal. So the students discussed for some time. That's the reason student chewed the fat for some time, had conversation for some time and decided not to complain. Fourth one, I was able to convince grandma to go with us after chewing the fat for about an half an hour with her. So it took me half an hour time to talk to my grandma to convince her. That's the reason chewing the fat for about an half an hour. Fifth one, the whole purpose of having this event is reunion, so that the school friends can come together and chew the fat, can chat, can talk. So this is the purpose of this reunion. So all the students come together and have conversation, have gossip, can talk to each other. That's the reason we organized this reunion. That's the reason we say come together and chew the fat. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, chew the fat, in the olden days, when the food supply began to run low on the ships, sailors were given salted pork and beef to chew on. It was very difficult to chew the tough meat. The sailors often grumbled or complained about the quality of food. So from this sailing experience, the idiom chew the fat has come into existence. It means to have an informal chat with someone or to complain or argue about something. Chink in the armor. Chink in the armor. It can also be said as Achilles heel. Achilles heel. It's an idiom. It means a flaw which can be taken advantage of by other people. It can be used with the things as well. In other words, it's an area of vulnerability or it is a weak point in somebody or something. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, if you ask me, Radha's fiery temper is the only chink in her armor, only weak point. That's the reason Radha's weak point is her temper, fiery temper. That's the reason it is the only chink in her armor. Second one, she is a brilliant social worker, but her lack of political awareness may be the chink in her armor. She is very brilliant. The only vulnerability that she has is lack of political awareness. That's the reason the chink of her armor is political awareness. Third one, opposition leaders hope to use their annual conference to attack what they see as the most vulnerable chink in the government's armor. The opposition party always wanted to see the weak points in the governments. That's the reason the most vulnerable chink in the government's armor. So the most weak point in the government's side. That's it. Fourth one, the candidate's opponents are busy looking for chinks in his armor. So opponents are searching for his weak points. That's the reason looking for chinks in his armor. Fifth one, he is brilliant, but his violent temper has destroyed many business relationships. It's a real chink in his armor. So his violent temper is his weak point, weak spot, vulnerable spot. That's the reason he lost many relationships. So it is a real chink in his armor. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, chink in the armor, chink means slit or a narrow opening. In the olden days, as a form of protection, soldiers used to wear armor. If the armor had any slit, chink, that is any narrow opening, then it became a weak spot for the soldier where any enemy can take advantage of. So chink in the armor means the most vulnerable spot, that is a weak point. Chip off the old block. Chip off the old block. It's an idiom. It means a son who behaves or looks like his father. In other words, someone who is very similar in character to their father or mother. Let us see it in the example. Bhaskar is definitely a chip of the old block. So Bhaskar is exactly looks like his father or mother. That's the reason Bhaskar is definitely a chip of the old block. Second one, Rajesh is a chip of the old block. He is a teacher just like his father. Father became teacher. Now he is also teacher. That's the reason Rajesh is a chip of the old block. Third one, James just won the same sailboat race his father won 20 years ago. He is a chip of the old block. So 20 years ago his father won, now he won. That's the reason James is a chip of the old block. Fourth one, same like his brother, he is a chip of the old block, very rude in behavior. He behaves exactly like his brother in a rude manner. That's the reason he is as like his brother. So he is a chip of the old block. Fifth one, Raju was a chip of the old block with his grey eyes and his dad's smile. So Raju looks like his dad in smile and in the grey eyes. That's the reason Raju is a chip of the old block. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, chip of the old block, the block here refers to a block of wood and the chip is a small piece which has been broken off the block of wood. The characteristics of the chip will be similar to those of the wood. So from this context, the idiom chip of the old block has come into existence. It means a son who behaves exactly like his father or mother is called chip of the old block. Chips are down. Chips are down. It's an idiom. It means to be in a difficult or dangerous situation. That is, if you say that something happens when the chips are down, you mean it happens when a situation gets very difficult, when a situation is very bad. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, when the chips were down, all the employees rallied around the chairman. So gathered around the chairman. When they were all in dangerous position, in dangerous situation, all the employees gathered around the chairman. That's the reason when the chips were down. Second one, Tinku was always there to help out when my chips were down. So whenever I was in situation, dangerous situation or difficult situation, Tinku helps me. That's the reason when my chips were down, when I was in dangerous situation. Third one day when the chips are down, you will know who your true friends are. So when you are in dangerous situation, difficult problem, then you will realize who the real friends are. That's the reason when the chips are down, when you are in danger. Fourth one, true friends will stand by you when the chips are down. When you are in difficult situation, the true friends will stand by you, will support you. That's the reason when the chips are down, when you are in dangerous situation. Fifth one, you can tell a lot about person's character from how they act when the chips are down. When somebody is in a dangerous position, then how he behaves, based on this we can assess that person's character. So how you behave when you are in difficult situation is very, very important. When your chips are down is very, very important. When we look at the origin of this idiom, chips are down, the chips referred to here are not potato chips, but the ones generally used in gambling. In movies, when the hero and the villain play cards, they keep increasing the stakes by throwing plastic chips on the table. These colored chips are a substitute for money. So when you are gambling and you find that your chips are down, it means you are losing. You are in a difficult situation because you don't have much money left. So from this game of gambling, chips are down has come into existence. It means to be in a difficult or dangerous situation. Chip on one's shoulder. Chip on one's shoulder. It's an idiom. It means to have an attitude problem, itching for a fight. That is, being angry because of something that happened in the past. If you have an attitude to fight always, to create a problem always, then you have chip on your shoulder. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, ever since Ramesh's promotion, Akash has had a chip on his shoulder. So from the point Ramesh got promotion, Akash was trying to fight with Ramesh. He is waiting for the chance. So he has some kind of itching towards his promotion. That's the reason Akash has had a chip on his shoulder. Second one, I'd be careful with Uma. She has a chip on her shoulder. Uma is always a problematic candidate, some attitude problem. So I am very careful with Uma because she has a chip on her shoulder. Third one of my colleagues is always arguing with everyone. I think he has a chip on his shoulder. So he has some attitude problem. He is arguing with everybody, one of my colleagues. That's the reason he has a chip on his shoulder. Fourth one, he is always picking up fights with everyone. He seems to have a chip on his shoulder. So he has some problem with his attitude, with his character, because he fights with everyone always. So he has a chip on his shoulder. Fifth one, why do you get so aggressive at the slightest hint of criticism? You seem to have a chip on your shoulder. When somebody criticizes you, why are you so aggressive, angry and fight with them? I think you have attitude of fighting. That's the reason you seem to have a chip on your shoulder. So when we look at the origin of chip of one's shoulder, the expression is American in origin. In the past, children who were angry about something and were itching for a fight would walk around with a piece of wood, that is chip, on their shoulder. This was a challenge to others, daring them to knock the chip off the shoulder. When somebody did, it always resulted in a fight. So this is how the idiom chip on one's shoulder has come into existence, which means to have an attitude problem or always ready for fight. Cleans the Augean stables. Cleans the Augean stables. Let us see the pronunciation of this word, A-U-G-E-A-N. A-U is pronounced as or, as in pour. G is pronounced as ja, as in jam. E is pronounced as E, as in sea. A is pronounced as A, as in China. So finally A-U-G-E-A-N is pronounced as Augean. Augean. The stress is on the second syllable G. So finally Augean is the right pronunciation of this idiom. Let us see the meaning of this. It is an expression mostly used in politics to mean clean up a mess in a very short period of time or to root out corruption. It has another meaning also, that is to clean a house. So cleaning an Augean stable is trying to remove the dirt or corruption from the society. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, Gayatri has been sent to clean the Augean stable of the previous administration. So in the previous administration there was a lot of corruption. So Gayatri was sent there to clean everything, which means to reform the administration. That's it. Second one, although they know it is not easy to reform the Augean stables of this society, they are still trying to do it. It is not very easy to clean the dirtiness or corruption in the society. Even then also they are trying. They didn't leave it. That's the reason we have said to reform the Augean stables. Third one, talking about the corruption, the PM said that he would cleanse the Augean stables in 100 days. So PM said within 100 days he will clean the entire corruption in the country. Fourth one, when he was elected, he pledged to clean the Augean stables of the corruption. So when he took the charge, he told that he will end the corruption. He will clean the entire corruption in the country. Fifth one, how to clean the Augean stables of this city remains a critical problem. So we are not able to understand the issue, that is how to clean the city or how to stop the corruption in this city. So when we look at the idiom and its origin, cleans the Augean stables, there is a story. The story goes like this. There was a king Augeas of Elis, had a huge stables containing about 3,000 oxen. According to legend, these stables were extremely dirty because they had not been cleaned in 30 years. Hercules was given 12 tasks by Zeus and was told that if he completed all of them successfully, he would become immortal. One of the labors he was given was to cleanse the Augean stables in a single day. Hercules completed this task successfully by diverting the course of the river Alpheus and letting the water run through the huge stables. So, from this story, this idiom, cleans the Augean stables, has come into existence, which means it is trying to remove the corruption or dirtiness in the society. Closed book. Closed book. It's an idiom. It means not to know anything about something. That is a mystery about something. If you say that someone or something is a closed book, you mean that you do not know anything about it. So let's see it in the examples. The first one, the serial killer's early life is a closed book. His early life is not known to anyone. It's a mystery. That's the reason it is a closed book. Second one, Mars is no longer a closed book for scientists because many rockets have been sent to Mars. So this planet is no longer a closed book, is no longer a mystery. Third one, I am afraid that this new maths formula will always be a closed book to me. I cannot understand what is this. I know nothing about this maths formula. That's the reason it's always be a closed book to me. Fourth one, Surya is a very able man, but something of him is a closed book. He is a very talented person, but there is something secret in his life. That's the reason something of him is a closed book. Fifth one, I am afraid physics will always be a closed book to me. I am really afraid about physics because I never understand anything about physics. That's the reason physics is always a closed book to me. So when we look at the origin of this idiom closed book, a book that remains closed can never be read, right? If it is never read, the contents always remain a mystery. Yes, of course, they are no longer known to anyone. That's the reason closed book is something that is a mystery. Cloud Cuckoo Land. Cloud Cuckoo Land. It's an idiom. It means a place where everything is perfect, being unrealistically idealistic, a knave. In other words, someone who is said to live in Cloud Cuckoo Land is a person who thinks that things that are completely impossible might happen, rather than understanding how things really are. That means if you are not thinking realistically, practically, then you are in Cloud Cuckoo Land. Let us see the examples. First one, if you think Sarala is going to return the money, you are living in Cloud Cuckoo Land. We know about Sarala. She takes money but never returns. If you think she will return, you are living in Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is impossible. She will never return. Second one, I was living in Cloud Cuckoo Land about my salary expectations. I thought my salary would increase this month, so that was not possible. They are not going to raise my salary. So I was living in Cloud Cuckoo Land. I thought it would happen, but it never happened. Third one, Rani thinks that even without any experience, she can find a job that will pay her 50,000 a month. I told her she was living in Cloud Cuckoo Land. Rani never had any experience, job experience. she has the confidence that she would get 50,000 per month, and I told her, you are living in cloud cuckoo land. That is not possible, I told her, but she never believed. Fourth one, if Tom thinks he will be able to live off his bad poverty, he is living in cloud cuckoo land. Tom is in very poor condition. He thinks his poverty will go away. But I told him, practically it is not possible. He is living in unrealistic land. He is living in cloud cuckoo land. Fifth one, he is always got some harebrained schemes on how to fix the world. All of them right out of cloud cuckoo land. So he has some foolish ideas, schemes. Harebrained means foolish schemes. All of them are waste. All of them are unrealistic. That's the reason all of them are out of cloud cuckoo land, not realistic at all. So when we look at the idiom and its origin, the expression cloud cuckoo land comes from a play, The Birds. It was written by Aristophanes, who was an Athenian playwright. In the play, the characters grow tired of imperfections on earth and decide to build the perfect city among the clouds. They call this place cloud cuckoo land. So in search of a perfect place, these people build an unrealistic world, that is a cloud cuckoo land in the clouds. So which means, and if you stop thinking practically and wait for the things to complete on their own, especially impossible things which will never happen, that is cloud cuckoo land. Cloud 9, on cloud 9 or on cloud 7. This is an idiom. It means feeling extremely happy, feeling on the top of the world, that is very excited. If you are really extremely cheerful, you can even say over the moon or seventh heaven. All of them are equal, feeling extremely excited or happy. So let us see it in the examples. First one, when results were announced, Naresh was on cloud 9 for several weeks. Naresh was very happy, extremely happy for several weeks because of the good results. So he was on cloud 9. Second one, the entire team was on cloud 9 after winning the championship. Of course. So the entire team was very happy, cheerful because they won the championship. That's the reason team was on cloud 9. Third one, what a pleasure of winning. It makes feel like floating on cloud 9 or cloud 7. So it makes me to feel very happy, over the moon. That's the reason feeling like floating on cloud 7 or cloud 9. Fourth, she's been on cloud 9 since she heard the news of her engagement. She never thought she would get engaged, but finally engaged, so she is very excited, happy. That's the reason she's been on cloud 9. Fifth one, the grandmother was on cloud 9 to see her grandson after a long time. Grandson might be staying in America and he came, and grandmother is very, very cheerful, happy, excited. That's the reason grandmother was on cloud 9. See, when we look at the origin of this idiom, cloud 9 or cloud 7 or over the moon or seventh heaven, all of them are same. So cloud 9. So actually no one is really sure where the expression comes from. Some believe that the original expression was on cloud 7. Very similar the expression seventh heaven also. Others believe that a 9 was chosen because it is considered a mystical number. According to weathermen, cloud 9 refers to the cumulonimbus or the thunderstorm cloud. This cloud often rises to 40,000 feet, and when you are on such a cloud, you are literally on the top of the world, right? The expression was made popular in the 1950s by the radio series titled Johnny Dollar. In the series, the hero is often knocked unconscious. When he is in this state, he is transported to cloud 9, from where he continues to talk to his listeners. So this is the story behind on cloud 9. Whatever may be the reason, on cloud 9, on cloud 7, over the moon, seventh heaven, all of them give equal meaning, same meaning, that is feeling very excited or extremely happy. in clover, be in clover or live in clover. It's an idiom. It means to be content, that is to live in comfort and have no financial worries, that is to live in a prosperous way, living good, well. Let us see it in the examples. First one, they struggled for over 20 years and now they are in clover. So they worked for 20 years and now they are very rich, they are very content. That's the reason they are in clover. Second one, after we sell the rights of this movie, we will be in clover. So after we sell this, we get money, then we will be prosperous, we will be rich. That's the reason we will be in clover. Third one, after we earn $1 million in our new business of gold, we will hopefully be in a clover. After we earn millions of money in the business of gold, then we will be very rich, prosperous. That's the reason we will be in a clover. Fourth one, if only I could win the lottery, then I would be in clover instead of working 3 jobs to pay my bills. Now I am working in 3 jobs, 3 areas to pay my bills. If I get this lottery, I'll be very rich, I'll be very prosperous, I'd be in clover. Fifth one, if I get this contract, I'll be in clover for the rest of my life. I have very little money saved, so when I retire, I won't exactly be in clover. I haven't saved most of the money, that's the reason when I retire, I'll not be in clover. If I get this contract, I'll be in clover, so I'll be prosperous. When we come back to the origin of this idiom in clover, clover is a plant which is used as a food for livestock. Animals usually found on farms. If any animal were allowed to eat as much clover as it wanted to eat, how would it feel? Pretty happy, right? Very happy. Don't you think so? Exactly. That is the reason in clover or be in clover or live in clover means to be very content, to live in comfortable, prosperous life. Cock a snooket. Cock a snooket. It's an idiom. It means to show defiance, that is to express scorn at someone in authority. In other words, to do something intentionally to show you have no respect for someone or something. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, Ravi cocked a snook at the policeman and kept on driving. Policeman stopped Ravi, but Ravi never gave respect to the policeman. He looked at him very seriously and he keeps on driving. So that's the reason Ravi cocked a snook at the policeman. Second one, Sanjay cocked a snook at the teacher, tore up the report card and walked out. So teacher gave report cards, but Sanjay didn't like it, so he tore up without any respect to the teacher. He tore up the paper and he gave a look at the teacher, very angry look, that is cocked a snook at the teacher, and he left the class. Third one, the boy cocked a snook at the park attendant and walked on the grass. The park attendant said, "Don't walk on the grass," but the boy didn't give respect to the words of the park attendant. So the boy cocked a snook at the park attendant and he walked on the grass. So he never respected him. Fourth one, he never misses a chance to cock a snook at modern art. He doesn't like modern art. Whenever he gets a chance, he insults modern art. He never shows any concern towards modern arts. That's the reason whenever he gets chance, he cocks a snook at modern art. Fifth one, Mahesh cocked a snook at their prime minister over this legislation. Over this new law, Mahesh didn't like it, so he cocked a snook at. He never respected it. He never followed it, never followed the new law. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, cock a snook at, the word snook means nose. When you cock a snook at someone, you place your thumb on the tip of your nose and point the remaining 4 fingers at the person you are making fun of and wiggle them. This is something that children do when they wish to ridicule someone. So it's very simple, and cock a snook at is to show defiance or to do something intentionally to show you have no respect for someone or something. Cock and bull story. Cock and bull story. It's an idiom. It means a lie, that is a story that cannot be believed. In other words, a story or explanation which is obviously not true. Let us see it in the examples. First one, don't give me that cock and bull story. You should have completed this long time ago. I gave you ample of time. You should have completed it by now. Don't tell me stories, cock and bull stories. Don't tell me lies. Second one, she started to tell some cock and bull story to the police officers about how she found a huge bag containing 5 pounds of gold. So when the police asked where she found this gold, she told all lies. That's the reason she told all cock and bull stories. Third one, when I asked Anjali why she hadn't done her assignment, she gave me some cock and bull story about having been abducted by aliens. When the teacher asked Anjali why she hadn't done her assignment, she came up with a cock and bull story, a lie, that somebody kidnapped, aliens kidnapped her. That's the reason she gave some cock and bull story. Fourth one, I don't believe one bit of your cock and bull story. I don't believe your lies. You are telling lies. So bit of your cock and bull story. Fifth one, when the chairman asked for an explanation, all he got from the vice president was some cock and bull story. So when the chairman asked vice president explanation, the vice president told all the lies. That's the reason vice president was some cock and bull story. So when we look at the origin of this idiom cock and bull story, some scholars believe that the idiom has its origins in the fables that we all read as children. Stories in which animals behave and talk like human beings. Such stories are often considered to be unrealistic by people who are very practical in their outlook. They can't believe that animals like lions, bulls, foxes, etc. can actually talk. Some others believe that cock and bull refer to two taverns. People who went to these bars got drunk and told tall tales, big stories. So finally, cock and bull story is nothing but a lie, a story that cannot be believed. Cold feet. Cold feet, it's an idiom. It means to lose courage and end up losing one's confidence. In one word, lose of courage. So if you are afraid of something, then you are really got cold feet. Examples. The first one, the burglar has got cold feet when the dog started barking. Thief came, but the dog barked at him. The thief lost his courage. So he became very frightened. That's the reason the burglar has got cold feet. Second one, Arvind agreed to sing at the local club, but he developed cold feet and cancelled the event. First, Arvind accepted to sing, but later somehow he lost his confidence and he cancelled the event. That's the reason he developed cold feet, lost his confidence. Third one, Ramesh and Rani were planning to get married next month, but Ramesh got cold feet and called off the wedding. So Ramesh and Rani, they were planning to marry, but suddenly what happened? Ramesh lost his confidence of marrying Rani, so he cancelled the wedding. So that's the reason Ramesh got cold feet. Fourth one, Veronica gets cold feet once again about going on a trip to Europe. So Veronica lost her confidence to go to Europe because she might have got some bad experience last time. That's the reason she was afraid to go. So she gets cold feet. Fifth one, he got cold feet when he heard the news of his transfer to remote area of the country, which is hundreds of miles from his hometown. So he was afraid because he was transferred to a remote area because he has to travel so many kilometers. That's the reason he lost his confidence. He got cold feet. So when we look at the origin of this idiom cold feet, it comes from the Italian expression avere minge freca ip, which literally means to have cold feet. The expression, however, was mainly used to mean to be without money. It was in this sense that the 16th century dramatist Ben Jonson used it in his play Volpone. But it was in the 1890s in America that the expression acquired the meaning of cowardice. So finally, get cold feet means to lose courage or confidence and become afraid of something or someone. Cold storage. Cold storage. It's an idiom. It means to put aside temporarily or to put something on the back burner. In other words, a state of being held in abeyance or a state of temporarily suspension. If you are keeping something aside for some time, you are really keeping that in cold storage. Let us see the examples. The first one, Venkat's plans of buying a house were put in cold storage when he lost his job. So Venkat wanted to buy a house, but he lost the job. So this buying a house idea was kept aside for some time. That's the reason it was put in cold storage. Second one, it's a brilliant idea, but given the current situation, we will have to keep it in a cold storage. So idea is extraordinary, fantastic, but we don't have time now. We are busy with some other work. We'll keep the idea aside for some time. That's the reason keep it in cold storage. Third one, I am forced to keep my marriage proposals in cold storage. I don't have job. That's the reason I am forced. I just want to marry, but I am forced to keep all these marriage proposals aside. Keep some time away. That's the reason. Keep all the proposals in cold storage. Fourth one, it's better to put the business idea into cold storage as we don't have money. We have fantastic business idea, but we don't have money. Let us keep the idea aside for some time. First earn the money. That's the reason keep the idea into cold storage. Fifth one, the president's domestic program had been in cold storage while he attended to a string of international crises. So president is attending some international problems. That's the reason he is not able to move within the country. So all his domestic programs are in abeyance. That is temporarily suspended, cancelled. Maybe in later time he will do it. That's the reason they had been in cold storage. When we look at the origin of this idiom cold storage, a cold storage is a place where perishables are stored. Once something is put in this room, you can forget about it because the cold temperature will ensure that it stays fresh. So when you keep something in cold storage means you are keeping that issue temporarily away. You are keeping that problem temporarily aside. If you keep anything in the state of abeyance or temporarily if you suspend, you are really keeping that in cold storage. Cook someone's goose. Cook someone's goose. It's an idiom. It means to spoil someone's chances or plans. That is to ruin someone. If you interfere with others and disrupt them, you are really cooking their goose. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, Babu's goose was cooked when they found the stolen idol in his safe. So idol was stolen, it was found in Babu's room. So his plans were spoiled. That's the reason Babu's goose was cooked. Second one, if you continue to treat Naresh the way you do, he'll cook your goose. If you treat the same way, Naresh will spoil your life. That's the reason Naresh will cook your goose, spoil your chances. Third one, he thinks he'll get away with stealing my idea, but I am going to cook his goose. So he wanted to steal my idea, but he doesn't know that I will spoil that. That's the reason I am going to cook his goose. I am going to spoil his stealing idea. Fourth one, news of my involvement in this scandal will cook my goose for sure. So my plans will be spoiled because there was a rumor or news that I was involved in this scandal. That's the reason my plans will be spoiled, disrupted. That is why we'll cook my goose for sure. Fifth one, electricity development in Asia. It is clearly coal that is going to cook our goose in the long run. So we produce electricity with the help of coal. But coal is natural resource. One day it will be completed. Then our plans will be spoiled. There will not be any coal to produce electricity. So we have to find some other new methods of generating electricity. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, cook one's goose, according to some sources, when King Erik, the mad king of Sweden, tries to capture a small town, the locals ridiculed his army by hanging a goose to shoot at. This insult made the king so angry that he not only burned the town down but also cooked the goose and ate it. So from this historical background, cook one's goose has come into existence. It means to spoil someone's chances or plans. Cost an arm and a leg. Cost an arm and a leg. Pay an arm and a leg. Pay through one's nose. So all of them are equal and they give equal meaning. They are idioms. This idiom means pay very dearly for something. Pay a lot of money for something. That is very expensive or excessively pricey. If you are paying a lot of money for something, you are really pay an arm and a leg for that, or cost an arm and a leg for that issue or for that item. So let us see it in the examples. The tickets for the one-day match cost Manoj an arm and a leg. So one-day match tickets are very costly and Manoj spent a lot of money to buy it. That's the reason cost Manoj an arm and a leg. Second one, I am not going to pay an arm and a leg for a piece of junk like that. So piece of junk food, I am not going to spend a lot of money for that. That's the reason I am not going to pay an arm and a leg. Not going to pay a lot of money for that. Third one, I would have loved to go with my friends on vacation, but it would have cost me an arm and a leg. I wanted to go on a vacation. I love going, but it cost me a lot. It is very expensive. That's the reason I don't want to go. That's the reason we have said cost me an arm and a leg. Fourth one, I'd love to have a new farmhouse, but it may cost me an arm and a leg. I wanted to have a farmhouse, but the cost is very high. So it may cost me an arm and a leg. Fifth one, electric scooter is the best thing to go anywhere without costs as arm and a leg. So we can reduce our expenses by electric scooter. That is why without costs an arm and a leg, we go anywhere. Without much expense, we go anywhere with electric scooter. Now let us look at the origin of this idiom cost an arm and a leg. The arm and the leg are very important parts of our body. We know it, right? There are many actions that one will be unable to perform if they are missing in our body. So it is impossible to perform so many activities without the arm and a leg. So they are very, very important for us. So they are very costly. So from this human body experience, we have taken this idiom cost an arm and a leg. We can even say it as pay an arm and a leg or pay through one's nose. All of them give equal meaning. That is very expensive, very costly, excessively pricey. Cross the bridge when you come to it. Cross the bridge when you come to it. It's an idiom. It means don't worry about the things that may or may not happen in the future. That is to deal with a problem only when it arises. So unnecessarily not worrying about anything and waiting for the turn to come. Let us see the examples. The first one, what if we run out of funding? We will cross the bridge when we come to it. So there is a doubt. What happens if we run out of the funding? What shall we do if funds are completed? Then he said, let us wait and see until it is completed. We will cross the bridge when we come to it. When we face that problem, we will solve it. Second one, Mahesh seemed unconcerned. He said that he would cross the bridge when he came to it. So when we see Mahesh, he seems like as if he is unconcerned, not taking care of anything, because he says we will see when we face the problem. That's the reason he would cross the bridge when he came to it. Third one, the weather station says it may rain over the weekend, but we will cross the bridge when we come to it. So the weather report is in the weekend there is a probability of raining, but we are saying when it rains we will see what to do, unnecessarily not worrying right now. That's the reason we will cross the bridge when we come to it. Fourth one, I don't know how we will pay the bills if you quit your job, but we will cross the bridge when we come to it. I don't understand how you pay your bills if you stop doing your job. Then he says, when I stop doing my job, then I'll think about it. Right now, I don't want to worry about that. We will cross the bridge when we come to it. Fifth one, what will you do if you fail in this exam? I'll cross the bridge when I come to it. So if somebody asks, What will you do if you fail in the exam? And you say, if I fail in the exam, then I'll think about it. Right now, I don't think about it. That's the reason I'll cross the bridge when I come to it. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, cross the bridge when you come to it, it is a self-explanatory. When you come close to the bridge, you have to think how to cross the bridge. But when you are away from the bridge, if you plan so many ways how to cross the bridge, it is unnecessarily wastage of time, energy. So cross the bridge when you come to it is not worrying about anything unnecessarily before time and dealing with a problem only when it arises. Curate's egg. Curate's egg. It's an idiom. It means something that is partly good and partly bad. Something that has both good and bad parts. No, 50-50. 50% good, 50% bad. If that is the case, it is curate's egg. Examples. First one, my favorite hero's latest film is a bit of curate's egg. 50% is good, 50% is bad. Film. So that's a bit of curate's egg. Second one, the film is something of curate's egg. The same thing. Half film is good, half is not good. So, of a curate's egg. Third one, the university is something of curate's egg. Elegant old buildings surrounded by ugly modern architecture. So old building is good, but surrounded by very bad, ugly, modern architecture buildings are there. That's the reason university is like curate's egg. 50% good, 50% bad. Curate's egg. Fourth one, this book is a bit of curate's egg. So 50% of the book is good and 50 is not so good, bad. That is why it is curate's egg. Fifth one, our vacation was a bit of curate's egg. The first few days were sunny, but the rest of the weeks was ruined by the heavy rain and flooding. So first we enjoyed, that was 50%. First days were good, later lot of rains and heavy floods. So it is 50% good, 50% bad. That's why it's a bit of curate's egg. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, curate's egg, the expression became quite popular because of a cartoon drawn by George du Maurier in Punch magazine in 1895. The cartoon shows a curator and a bishop eating breakfast. The curator unfortunately has been served a bad egg. The bishop remarks, I am afraid you have got a bad egg. Since the curator doesn't want to offend his host, he replies, oh no, my lord, I assure you, parts of it are excellent. So from this cartoon, curate's egg has come into existence. It means partly good, partly bad. That is 50-50%. 50% good, 50% bad. Curl one's hair. Curl one's hair. It's an idiom. It means to shock, frighten, to cause fright, shock or surprise in someone. So curl one's hair means it's a sudden shock, surprise. Let us see it in the examples. The first one, I thought the new horror movie would make my hair curl, but I was disappointed. I thought the new horror movie will frighten me, but I was not frightened. So I was disappointed. That's the reason would make my hair curl. Second one, the speed at which Ravi drove was enough to curl my hair. I was afraid of the speed that he drove, Ravi. So that's the reason my hair curl. Third one, don't ever sneak up on me like that again. You really curled my hair. Don't make me afraid like that. You really frightened me. You really curled my hair. Means you really frightened me. Fourth one, I have heard stories about that guy. That would make your hair curl. That guy is very bad guy, and if you really listen to his stories and you would frightened, you would make your hair curl. You would be surprised, frightened. Fifth one, the horror film made my hair curl. So that particular horror film made me frightened, shock. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, curl one's hair, this idiom is not meant to be taken literally. Literally, it doesn't mean that. When a person is really frightened by something, his hair does not curl, but it stands up. But in the usage, curl one's hair means to shock, to become frightened by something or someone. Curry favor. Curry favor. It's an idiom. It means an act of praising someone so that some benefit or advantage can be gained, or seek to gain advantage by flattery. If you really giving lot of flattery or praises to some other in order to get some advantage from that person, you are really curry favoring that person. Let us see the examples. Number 1, Ajay is trying to curry favor with his uncle again. He is praising his uncle again because Ajay has got some work with his uncle. So he is trying to curry favor. Second one, if I were you, I wouldn't attempt to curry favor with anyone. If I were in your place, I will never try to flatter anybody. So that is the reason I wouldn't attempt to curry favor with anyone. Third one, her uncle is so rich that she feels compelled to curry favor with him lest she does not get mentioned in the will. So uncle is going to write a will. She wanted her name in the will. So she started flattering, praising her uncle. That is why she feels compelled to curry favor with him, praised him. Fourth one, it is not a good idea to curry favor with a person who does not care to notice you otherwise. That person is not noticing you, observing you, not at all taking care of you. Why are you praising him? Why are you flattering him? That is not good idea to curry favor. Fifth one, the new hires in this work type are usually seen curry favoring with the bosses until they figure out that they cannot reduce the work burden at all. So when we hire some new job holders, they try to get some attention from the boss. So they flatter the boss. That's the reason usually seen curry favoring the bosses. So when we look at the origin of this idiom curry favor, the curry in this expression has nothing to do with the curry that we eat normally. This curry comes from the world of horse riding. People who take care of horses make use of a curry comb or to rub the animal down. It is from this that we get the expression to curry, meaning to groom a horse or to rub down a horse. The word favor in the idiom has got nothing to do with the favor we know. It is in fact a corruption of the French name Fable or Fauvel. Fable is the name of a cunning centaur that appears in a French story written in the 14th century. A centaur, as you probably know, is an animal that is a half man and half horse. In the story, people who wanted to be in good books of the evil Fable used to flatter him and also rub him down. In other words, the characters in the story used to curry Fable. In fact, the original expression was to curry Fable. Since Fable sounded like favor, native speakers of English started saying it to curry favor. To curry favor, which means an act of praising someone so that you get some benefit out of it. In other words, seek to gain advantage by unnecessary flattery. Cut and ride. Cut and ride. It's an idiom. It means a decision that is final, something that cannot be changed, that is unchangeable. In other words, predetermined, not changeable or ready-made. Let us see it in the examples. Number 1, Shivani plans are cut and dried. You cannot make any changes now. So she has already planned and you cannot change her plans, Shivani's plans. Second one, Srikanth's talk was cut and dried. He must brush up on his presentation skills. So Srikanth's presentation skills are not so good, not so interesting, because his presentation is not very interesting. So he has to change. Third one, the rules in our schools are cut and dried. Everyone is expected to follow them. So in our school, you cannot change any rule. And what we can do is just follow them. That's it. Fourth one, although most parties have agreed on the deal, it is not yet cut and dried, not yet finalized. All of them agreed, all the parties agreed, but it is not a final decision. The final decision is still pending. Next one. It seems to be a cut and dried story. Social activists and media come together to do something helpful. Yeah, it happens most of the time. Social activists and media together help people, and we have been experiencing this situation in this corona pandemic. And when we look at the origin of this idiom cut and dried, according to some scholars, the cut and dried material refers to timber, that is wood. Wood that has been dried after cutting is ready for use. One can use it to light a fire. Some others believe that the idiom refers to the cut and dried herbs available in shops, which can be readily used in one's cooking. So, cut and dried is nothing but a decision that is final, that cannot be changed, ready-made. And other meaning is uninteresting. Cut and run. Cut and run. It's an idiom. It means to run away from one's problems. That is, to get out of a situation when it becomes too difficult or unpleasant. Let us see it in the examples. When the pressure began to mount, many in the management decided to cut and run. So when the problem increased, when the pressure increased in the management, many employees try to avoid it, stop the job, and they get out of the company. Second one, Raju's cowardly decision to cut and run was criticized by everyone. So Raju was good, but when the problem came, he stopped everything and he ran away. He went somewhere. So everybody criticized him for doing such thing. Third one, you can't just cut and run when your friends are in trouble. This is very, very important. So we have to help the friends who are in trouble. When you escape such situation, you are really just cut and run. Fourth one, the robbers tried to cut and run when they heard the approaching sirens. The thieves came for some kind of theft, but suddenly they heard police sirens. So immediately they stopped everything. They cut and run. Fifth one, when she got pregnant, he cut and run. When she was pregnant, the guy who was responsible for the pregnancy ran away from her. So that's the reason he cut and run. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, cut and run, the expression comes from the world of sailing. In the old days, when a ship that was at anchor came under attack, the sailors, in order to make a quick getaway, cut the rope to which the anchor was tied. Instead of going through the lengthy process of raising the anchor and then setting sail, they merely cut the rope and allowed the ship to run before the wind. So, from the world of sailing, this idiom cut and run has been come into force. So, which means to run away from one's problems. Cut no ice. Cut no ice. It's an idiom. It means to have no effect on someone, not to be influenced or impressed by something. In other words, to fail to make an impression. So if you're trying to impress somebody, if that person is not impressed by your voice or words, so you cut no ice with that person. Let us see the examples. The excuses I gave cut no ice with the new teacher. New teacher came, I came late, and I gave so many excuses, but the teacher was not convinced by my excuses. So the excuses I gave cut no ice. Second one, the romantic soap story cut no ice with the audience. Story was very romantic, but the audience were not influenced by the story. So story cut no ice. Third one, I have heard her excuses and they cut no ice with me. Yes, I know what excuses she gave, but I didn't change. I am not impressed by her excuses, so nothing changes. They cut no ice with me. Fourth one, his opinion cuts no ice with me. So he hasn't changed anything about me. So he is not changed. He has the same opinion about me, so his opinion cuts no ice with me. Fifth one, I am sorry, but that ridiculous rational cut no ice with me and will not change my mind. I am not going to change my mind according to that person. I am so sorry. So when we see the origin of this idiom, cut no ice, in the olden days when the river or sea froze, sailors used to get off the ship to break the ice that was blocking their passage. Ice is a very hard substance and it requires an extraordinarily strong instrument to break it. Ordinary tools will make no impression on it. They will not cut the ice. So the exact opposite of this idiom cut no ice is cut the ice or break the ice. Cut no ice means to have no effect on someone. Cut the ice means to have effect on someone. Cut the ice or break the ice means to have effect on someone. So finally, cut no ice means to fail to make an impression. If you can make an impression, then you are really breaking the ice or cutting the ice. Cut off one's nose to spite one's face. Cut off one's nose to spite one's face. It's an idiom. It means harm oneself much more than the person one is trying to hurt. That is, to do something because you are angry, even if it is causing a trouble for you. Even something is causing a trouble for you, you do it in spite of that, then you are really cutting off your nose to spite your face. First one, if you stay home because your ex-boyfriend is at the party, or into cutting off your nose to spite your face, you have to attend the party. Since your ex-boyfriend is there, if you skip the party, and the party is very, very important, and he is your best friend, the person who is organizing the party, so don't cut off your nose to spite your face. Second one, I know you are mad at your parents, but running away is only going to make your own life harder. Don't cut your nose off to spite your face. I know you don't like your parents, but if you run away from your home, it will make your life more difficult, hard. So don't do it. That is a foolish thing. So don't cut your nose off to spite your face. Third one, Rajesh loves to play tennis, but he refused to play because he doesn't like Ravi. He was cutting off his nose to spite his face. The problem is with Ravi, but Rajesh is not playing tennis, which he likes the most. He is really cutting off his nose to spite his face. So Ravi is not important for Rajesh. Tennis is important, but Rajesh is stopping playing tennis. That's the reason he is cutting off his nose to spite his face. Fourth one, you can refuse to talk to her if you like, but you are just cutting off your nose to spite your face. If you don't like her, don't talk to her. But do you know, she is our boss, and it is your duty to talk to her regularly. And if you don't talk to her, you are really cutting off your nose to spite your face. One day you may lose your job. Mind it. Fifth one, Divya cut off her nose to spite her face when she refused to come to the industrial exhibition with us. So industrial exhibition is very, very important for Divya to complete her project work, but she doesn't want to come with us. And she is really cutting off her nose to spite her face. She is doing more harm by not coming to the industrial exhibition, which is very essential for Divya. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, cut off one's nose to spite one's face, the expression has been around for quite some time, and it was translated from the French language. Si couper les nains pour faire de pet à son visage. It's a French sentence which means cut off one's nose to spite one's face. If you wanted to get even with someone or hurt the feelings of that person, would you do it by cutting off your nose? Probably not. It wouldn't be a very sensible thing to do, right? So this expression first appeared in print in the late 18th century. So cut off one's nose to spite one's face is to harm oneself much more than the person one is trying to hurt. Cut your eye teeth on something. Cut your eye teeth on something. It's an idiom. It means to have a lot of experience under your belt. That is, to know all there is to know about something. That is, to become experienced or sophisticated about something. When you really become so experienced about something, you really cut your eye teeth on that particular thing. Let us see the examples. The first one, does Ajay know anything about cars? He cuts his eye teeth on them. So Ajay has a lot of experience on cars. Second one, it is so boring in this town, I'd give my eye teeth for a little excitement. I wanted to do some experiment for my excitement because I am so bored in this town. I'd give my eye teeth. I wanted to have new experience. Third one, if you want to know something about computers, ask Madhav. He cut his eye teeth on them. So Madhav has got a lot of experience on computers. If you really have any doubt, ask him. He'll surely clarify them. Fourth one, she had cut her eye teeth on local radio stations but made her name on a reality show. She had a lot of experience on radio stations but never got her name. But she started reality show. She got a lot of name and fame. But she had a lot of experience in radio stations. She cut her eye teeth at local radio stations. Fifth one, Johnny may be young, but he cut his eye teeth on academic writing. So his perspective and expertise will be invaluable to us. So he is so experienced in academic writing, we cannot compete with him because he cut his eye teeth on academic writing. He is so expertise in academic writing. So when we look at the origin of this idiom, cut your eye teeth on something, an eye tooth refers to the canine in upper jaw. The two canines play a very important role when we have to bite into something. The canine is referred to as eye tooth because each is positioned right below the eye. So from the mouth itself, we got this idiom, cut your eye teeth on something, which means to have a lot of experience under your belt. That is to become so experienced about something. Caught in the crossfire. Caught in the crossfire. It's an idiom. It means to be involved in a situation where people around you are arguing. In simple words, getting caught in the middle of a fight. Let us see it in the examples. First one, when parents fight over trifles, their children are often caught in the crossfire. It's quite natural in every house when parents are talking about small things, fighting about small issues. Children are in the middle. Children often caught in the crossfire. Second one, police officers are often caught in the crossfire when apprehending criminals. So when they wanted to catch the criminals, sometimes it happened, they get caught in the crossfire. So they are in the middle of the fight. Third one, I was caught in the crossfire of their argument over the budget. But I refused to take sides and told them to work it out on their own. So there was a big argument on budget. Two sides they're arguing. I was caught in the middle of the argument, but I didn't take any side, either of the sides. I told them, you discuss and come to a conclusion. Fourth one, my mother and father were having an argument and unfortunately my sister got caught in the crossfire. My little sister, she knows not so many things. So when my father and mother are fighting, she went in between. She was in the middle. So she got caught in the crossfire. Fifth one, when my sister and her friend have an argument, they try to draw me into it. But I always make sure that I don't get caught in the crossfire. So I am so intelligent. When my sister and her friend are arguing, they wanted me to be in the middle. So I am so smart, I escaped. So I didn't get caught in the crossfire. So the idiom caught in the crossfire is self-explanatory. We can understand by it. So when two people are shooting at each other, I think no intelligent person get caught in the crossfire, right? So from this idiom has come into force, which means to be involved in a situation where people around you are really arguing. That is to get caught in the middle of a fight.